Okay, so I've already recorded this once, but it was too damn long. I just want to give my thoughts on Israil Madrimov versus Bud Crawford taking place this Saturday. It's the Riyadh season card taking place in LA. Yeah, I feel like this main event actually represents the card as a whole pretty well. And I say that because regarding this main event and the card it's fronting, there seems to be two sides, two opposite ends of the spectrum where some people think it's brilliant, it's the best thing since sliced bread, and they can't wait, chomping at the bit to watch it. And the other half think it's a crap card, think it's overblown, it's overhyped, and it's a bit, as I say, a bit crap, and so's the main event. I sit somewhere in the middle, judging the card, seeing as it's laid out now, we know what we're getting. I think it's a good card. That's it. I think it's good. Good card, good main event. I certainly don't think it's the best card America's ever seen. I think that was Eddie Hearn's words. I think that's bollocks, to be honest. It's a good card, but even like by the standard of this Riyadh season campaign that we've been seeing over the past few months, I think this is actually one of the lesser cards. Just my opinion, but hey, it's my video. I say what I want. But it's good. Like if you're looking forward to it, good for you. I just think we've seen better cards in recent months. And with this main event, kind of the same thing. I think it's a good fight, but it's not one I'm like over the moon to see. I'm interested in it. It'll be good, I think, and hopefully it's a spectacle. But anyway, let's break this one down and give you guys a prediction. So starting with Madrimov, he's a fighter who I haven't followed all that closely. I'm familiar with him. I've seen a fair bit over the years, but I haven't followed his career like too closely, just because I've never found him to be all that special. In my opinion, he's a good, solid fighter without being spectacular. I remember when he first turned pro in the early days of his pro career, there were a lot of comparisons for some reason between him and Golovkin, which I thought was silly and bizarre. And as far as I could see, the only similarity between Madrimov and Golovkin was how they look, like their facial likeness was kind of similar. Other than that, I didn't know what people were going on about. I actually thought it was a bit disrespectful to Golovkin because he was, in his prime, a legit dangerous man, like a top tier operator. And whether Madrimov's in his prime yet or not, I guess it remains to be seen. At 29, yeah, he's only had 11 fights, but he's been boxing a long time, so I don't know how much better he's going to get. So I think it's safe to assume that he's at or close to his prime. And yeah, I don't really see him in the same stratosphere as a prime Gennady Golovkin. But hey, as I say, it's just my opinion. But nevertheless, he is a good, solid fighter, I feel. Doesn't do anything spectacularly well, but in the same breath, doesn't do anything bad. He's probably going to be a difficult guy to beat, but I don't see him as being like the top tier. And really, that's the same for his opposition as well. He hasn't really fought anyone who's like a big name talent. There is a couple of guys on his record that you recognise, but they're lower tier fighters. And to kind of profile Madrimov, considering that he's come through that Uzbek amateur school, and I think he did pretty well in the amateurs. I can't remember his credentials exactly, but I believe he medalled at the 2016 Olympics. Did he get a silver or a bronze? Let me just double check. Let me give the man his credit. No. Did he even attend the Olympics? I mean, even if he didn't, he did a lot as an amateur. He was attended a few Asian games, Asian championships, and if you know boxing and you're decent with geography, you'll know that Eastern Europe and Central Asia, they are very, very, very tough amateur systems to shine in because you have so much talent. And a lot of these guys, you'll never even know their names unless you follow amateur boxing because they rarely turn pro. But they are some of the most complete fighters in the amateurs that you'll ever see. They're technically proficient, very refined, super disciplined, punch hard, a lot of them. So for Madrimov to do well coming up through that amateur system, it says a lot. But even then, by, as I say, Uzbek amateur system standards, he's actually a little bit rough around the edges by my eye. I think there's just a bit of refinement that's lacking. A lot of the time when I've seen Madrimov, he's a little bit wild almost. As I say, he's got a bit of roughness around the edges. I don't know if that is him coming away from his Uzbek amateur roots, and maybe it's the influence of having an American professional coach, or maybe he's just doesn't really fit that mold anyway. But yeah, sometimes he can be a little bit wild. Sometimes I feel like he lacks a bit of culture in his boxing, for whatever that means. Just the nuance is what I'm trying to say. And Madrimov has a kind of a strangely small but strong following of people who really get behind him and believe he's the truth. And I'm not talking about his fellow Uzbeks, because they're naturally going to get behind their guy. But even people who they just see something in Madrimov. But I think a lot of that personally is based off his highlight reel. Because yeah, when you look at his highlight reel, you're like, oh damn, this guy's athletic, he's dynamic, he's doing all this crazy maneuvers in the ring, boxing rings around his opponents and landing these big flashy combos. But when you actually watch his fights, you see that there are long stretches, there's spaces where he's not really doing that much. He's not, I don't want to say he's not busy, because busy isn't always productive, but he's just not, he doesn't give me the look of a truly elite technical boxer. Someone like a Lomachenko, and I bring up Lomachenko because when years ago, I don't know if you guys know Barry Robinson. If you don't, he was a coach who was on YouTube for a long time, and very good coach. I used to follow him, and he used to do very in-depth film study videos, and he had a system of coaching boxing. So you had to kind of learn his lingo. And he was analysing this clip of TJ Dillashaw sparring Vasily Lomachenko. And obviously Dillashaw is a UFC fighter, and we know Lomachenko is, top tier elite boxing talent. And he was saying that, or the gist of what he was saying, as I interpreted it, was that Dillashaw did well when he was able to use his moves. He had certain moves that he could pull off that, I guess they were his kind of pet moves, his pet maneuvers. But outside of that, he didn't have the same technical nuance, the same kind of boxing brain as a Lomachenko. And of course, very few people have the same boxing brain as a Lomachenko. But the notion is that you can be someone who succeeds in boxing because you have a couple of tricks up your sleeves. You have a couple of moves that you can pull out, but you're never going to be as successful as a tried and true boxer who has a lot of wrinkles to their game, and they understand, okay, it's more about the principles and having that kind of principled approach to create opportunities rather than just waiting for them to come around, rather than waiting for them to be presented and then capitalizing. And I always felt like that's what Madrimov does. He has some very flashy moves where he can really show his athleticism, but away from that, or in between those moves, there isn't much. There isn't much activity. He's not really asking many questions of his opponent, something that, say, a Lomachenko does really well, when he's just picking, prodding, probing, slipping, feinting, all that stuff to, as everyone says, download data. And then he builds his offense off of that. Madrimov, I don't feel really does that. However, in the Igbokwe fight, which was April last year, there were flashes, I feel, extended kind of instances where Madrimov's boxing was flowing a bit more. And maybe he just got into a bit of a groove, a bit more of a rhythm, but he was letting his punches flow a lot better. And I feel like he did a good job of controlling Igbokwe, who was a bit of an awkward customer because he was a southpaw and he was a big guy. Like he's I think checking his box rec now, his last fight was at super middleweight. He looks like a super middleweight, Igbokwe. He was a big guy, but Madrimov was just tattooing him at times. And it was quite impressive to see Madrimov break out of that quite stationary, stagnant mold, letting his boxing flow. And I believe that's what he needs to do against Terence Crawford. The only thing is, I don't see in this fight how Terence Crawford allows him to get into that rhythm. I personally think, and I've mentioned this before, in my opinion, Terence Crawford is the most complete fighter in boxing. I think technically, athletically, even mentally, I think, from an instincts point of view as well, Terence Crawford, for me, pound for pound number one, the most complete fighter in boxing. Not unbeatable by any stretch, but I think Terence Crawford is a real tough ask for even someone as talented as Madrimov. And so I think from a technical or maybe more of a theoretical approach, Madrimov needs to get into that boxing flow. That is his best opportunity, because the sudden kind of ambush, the wide attacks that he's typically known for, I don't think that's going to work against Crawford, someone who's very technically proficient, an elite technician really, someone who's very cute in the ring, has good eyes, and has plenty of versatility and a massive toolbox. I don't think that's going to work against Terence Crawford. But at the same time, I don't think Crawford's going to let Madrimov into the fight where Madrimov can get into that rhythm and really challenge Terence Crawford with his boxing, which, not to say that he would be able to challenge, but I think it would be his best opportunity to. And so for that reason, I think Terence Crawford, I have to go with him. I'm fairly confident in picking him. I suspect that he's probably going to win in a long fight. Personally, I think the smart money is on Crawford to win a wide UD, potentially 10-2 or 9-3, something like that. It wouldn't surprise me if Crawford was able to get Madrimov out of there, because Crawford is a very good finisher. But I suspect Madrimov is tough. I've seen nothing to confirm this. I just suspect he can take a punch, and he's probably, a tough guy. That being said, Terence Crawford, over the years, it's been spoken about, he does have some potential vulnerabilities in the punch resistance department. I think they've been overblown personally. I can only think of 2 instances off the top of my head where Crawford has been noticeably hurt. The first one being against Gamboa back in 2014, the second against Kavaliauskas in 2019. For my money, he was actually dropped by Kavaliauskas as well. All being fair, that's what I saw. Kavaliauskas, a very underrated fighter, very solid, very rugged, but also quite well skilled. And for my money, I think Kavaliauskas is probably a bit more of a nuanced boxer than Madrimov. We saw Terence Crawford come through that, kind of weather some early rough moments early on, and really dog Kavaliauskas out of the fight. And now I'm not saying that Terence Crawford is tough enough to just let his chin hang out to dry in front of Madrimov. Madrimov, I'm sure, packs enough power to hurt Crawford seriously if he lands flush. I just don't think he will. I don't think we're going to see Madrimov land those punches on Crawford to really challenge and test Crawford's chin and potentially expose it if he does have any deficiencies in punch resistance. And so, yeah, I personally think that this is going to be a fairly routine win by Crawford. I think he's going to be able to manage distance quite well. I think he's going to be able to time Madrimov, because Madrimov, he doesn't really rely on much of a defensive responsibility. As I say, sometimes when he gets into the flow, or you see his highlight reel, he's doing this kind of crazy head movement, getting angles, that kind of stuff. But in between that, he is there to be hit, because, sometimes his hand placement is a little off. Like, he'll lean back against the southpaw, which just leaves a window for the right jab and maybe even the left cross. And maybe he'll try to counter that. But someone shrewd like Crawford, who's a good mover too, there's very little tell on what Crawford does. For my money, what I've seen of Madrimov is he likes to, rather than move himself, he prefers to hold an opponent in place, which works quite effectively, but that's against lower tier opposition who don't really challenge that. Whereas I think Terence Crawford will. I think Crawford will either challenge that with offense, or he'll adapt so that Madrimov can't use that particular control on him. and then it'll force Madrimov to kind of dig deep in terms of his boxing toolkit and have to go through like, oh, what do I do now? What do I do now? But yeah, this is going on a bit longer, even longer than the first recording. So anyway, I think Terence Crawford is going to be able to control this fight. Maybe there are a couple of moments where he gets pushed back by Madrimov, but I don't think we're going to see Madrimov really get to Crawford. And so I suspect this fight goes the distance. I think the smart money's on Crawford to win a wide UD, 10 rounds to 2, 9 rounds to 3, something of that nature. Yeah, seeing Terence Crawford win another world title in another weight class. However, that is just my opinion. Take it with a pinch of salt, because some of you may know I recently picked Joe Joyce to beat Derek Chisora, and we saw how that worked out. So very much egg on my face. Leave your opinions in the comment section below. But for now, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.